Hi, everybody.
Sorry about that.
No problem. First of all, just want to do a little bracha. I don't know if you usually do this, but a bracha la'asok b'divrei Torah, to engage ourselves in the study of Torah. So if you want to, of course, we try to stay unmuted as much as possible, but if you want to unmute and say anything, we're all professionals now at Zoom. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishem mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about, not because I'm just that into it, but I wanted to talk a little bit about astrology in Judaism. And it's a topic that doesn't come up that often. And I'm going to start at the end and come back to the beginning. There's a beautiful teaching that I generally refer to in the Talmud that talks about how when we perform an act of kindness, the whole world changes. The entire trajectory of the world just changes. And you know that for Rosh Hashanah, for example, whatever your verdict is, our tradition says, that repentance, prayer, and charity, or acts of loving kindness, can actually just change the whole perspective, how God's going to view you, how the world is. So I always teach this thing of a story about somebody that was supposed to die, but she doesn't die because she does something nice. But I started to read it a couple of months ago and just say, okay, where did the Talmud sort of come up with that? And where it does it, it comes up on the topic of astrology. So I just want to show you a couple things before we start to look at the text. And let me just see if I can do my screen sharing here. But so we were just talking, Claudia and I, Claudia had your grandfather, I believe it was, had a stamp collection. So I too had a stamp collection when I was 10 or 11 years old. And this was one of my favorite stamps. And I actually didn't realize what I was actually looking at. Has anybody ever seen that stamp? It's very famous because the Israeli something, there was an international, I always mispronounce it, but it's the stamp collection people. But this was very interesting because it was divided up into 4 diamonds. It came out around in the late 50s or early 60s. And I never really take a look at it. I just thought it was cool because it has 4 little segments, like pieces of pie. And I didn't really think very much about it until I was in Israel at one point. And we toured where this actually emanates from. I'm going to give you 4 slides before we get going. And I noticed that on the floor of one of the synagogues, I believe this is in north near Sipori, near Tiberias. And look again, we have on the floor of a synagogue, do you recognize, can you see some of the astrological signs here? Here's Pisces and Taurus, and I'm not that, and Gedi, the Chad Gadya, right? There's a goat. And what I started to understand is that astrology 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, was kind of interwoven somehow into Judaism. So you're going to have questions already. And just want to show that this is a very popular stamp, if I can just find it. I keep losing it. And again, a lot of you who did some posted stamps during the late 50s, the 60s, you'll notice too, I'll just do this one as well, that I can't find, there it is. Okay, does anybody remember these stamps? I know they're a little bit small there, right? But does anybody ever post, remember we used to post stamps to Israel, and they had these little, I didn't think very much about it, but when you look at it, every one of these is the astrological zodiac, right? Do you remember these, anybody remember these stamps? It's, I have tons of them in my collection. I have first date covers, I have all kinds, and I just never really gave it that much thought. So So here's what's basically going on. You study Talmud on a regular basis, and what happens is that, as you're aware, the Jerusalem. Correct. I'm going to get to that in a second. Well done. So Margot says that the word mazel. Let's go there for a second. The word mazel tov does not mean high five, mazel tov, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. It's changed in meaning. It's the same way that when we hear our kids or grandchildren going, oh my God, or OMG, nobody is referring to the deity, is somewhere in heaven. Or when someone says LOL, nobody's laughing out loud, but it's sort of like a thing that we type. And mazal over time has become, what mazal actually means is a astrological constellation. May you be privileged to stand under a fortuitous series of stars that will positively determine your fate in the foreseeable future. In other words, mazel tov, right? But that's where it actually comes from. Thank you for that comment. And I just want to show you this very interesting slide, which basically is the astrological, all the different signs. And the Jerusalem Talmud, which maybe you've studied from with many of the guests that have been here over the years. The Jerusalem Talmud comes out about 400 CE, but the Babylonian Talmud basically is first released or assembled 500 CE, and it is written in Babylon, where people are very into fire, the stars, the celestial, etc. So I'm just going to do this very, very quickly. But for example, Libra, and there is an astrological sign which is assigned to each tribe and each month of the year. For example, Libra comes around the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Anybody see the idea of the scales comes up? It's one of those aha moments, right? Whereas Aries comes up around the time of Pesach. Anybody see any connection? What's the sign? It's the ram, right? It's the sign of the ram. Gemini, where the twins come up, is the sign where we receive the two tablets on Shavuot. So we don't have time right now, but the Kabbalists actually make connections with every single month of the year and a different astrological sign. In the same way, each one of the tribes of Israel is also assigned one of these tribal. And there are, if you just as a follow-up to this, you'll see many, many, many sites online that when people looked up at the stars, late at night, they didn't have internet and they didn't have television. Where are you going to look? You're going to look up in the beautiful stars, and they saw constellations. They saw all kinds of different formations in the skies, which basically said, and if you saw a beautiful constellation and you had a good day, then you basically said Mazel Tov, right? Mazel Tov. So that's where actually that phrase actually come from. So where's Marco? Mark, thank you for that allusion. So where I want to begin actually in the text study comes from the book of Genesis, and in the chapter of Lech Lecha, I'm going to let somebody unmute. What's the story of Lech Lecha? Lech Lecha, go to the land that I will show you. So where does that come from? What's going on in that chapter? Does anybody remember that? Abraham is
told to leave his family and go to leave his father and take his family and go to the land.
Okay, so the way that the Kabbalists look at that, they say, and we'll see this in a moment, Abraham, the constellation that you are standing under, where you are standing under right now, is not conducive to you creating a son with Sarah. Therefore, Lech Lecha, go and lift yourself up to the land that I will show you, because I know this is a little bit weird, that the constellation that you're going to go to will be more fortuitous for you to procreate with Isaac. Now, if you think that I'm off the mark here, I'm going to show you the Rashi on this. And also he says, and God says to Abraham, and I will make your name great.
Right.
Everybody remember that, right? Now, usually we say, I'm going to make you a gadol, an important person. You're going to be respected. You're going to have lots of, but actually, Rashi says, we're going to go there in a second, if I hope I can find it quickly. Let me find the actual text here. Let me just get rid of this is going to be a dazzling array of moving from text to text. And the interesting thing, where is it? Rashi, Genesis. Okay, so let's go here. So here's the text as it appears. Sometime later, let's see, we're in the beginning of chapter 15, which I just lost. Come back, chapter 15. Great, I just lost it. There it is, okay. Sometime later, the word of the Lord came to Avram. Remember, his name is Avram at the time, right? It says, fear not, Avram, I am a shield to you. Your reward, by the way, Magen Avraham, right? The shield to you. Your reward shall be very, very great. But Abraham says, oh, Lord God, what can you give me, seeing that I shall die childless, right? Because he wants to have a son, right? And the one in charge of my household is the Damascus Eliezer. Okay. Abraham said further, since you have granted me no offspring, my steward shall be my heir. In other words, he's going to hand it over to his man Friday. His name is Eliezer. And the word of the Lord came to him and said, that one shall not be your heir, but one of your own issues shall be your heir. Okay. And he took him outside and he said, look to the heavens and count the stars. And if you're able to count them, so shall your offspring be. We know this, right? That God says to Abraham, look up in the stars and you will have as many offspring as there are if you can count them up there. Later, we go to Jacob and Jacob says, as many as there are sands in the beach, okay? And I am the Lord your God who brought you, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's see where Rashi goes with this, and we're about to enter into the world of astrology. And what Rashi is going to say is that when God says, I will make your name great, I'm going to add a hey to your name, and your name is Avram. Now it's going to be Avraham, and now the numerological content, the number in your name shall now become greater. And that's the combination of letters from the stars. Let me show you this. And here's what Rashi says. Okay, Rashi, again, is our biblical commentator. He's a wine merchant, a brilliant commentator. He's our number one commentator, lives in the 1100s in France. And here's what he says. He took him outside. The real meaning is, right, he brought him out of his tent so he could look at the stars. And in the Midrash, which is our series of legends and explanations, he says, go forth and give up your astrological speculations, right? You have seen by the planets that you will not raise a son. And Abraham indeed may have no son, but Abraham will have a son. So when he says, I will make your name great, he's not talking necessarily, God's not talking about making your reputation wonderful. He's literally he's actually adding to the name, and he's saying, I will make your name great. I'm going to add a hey. And now you're going to have a better name. Like we always look at this in terms of philosophical. What does person bring to the world? Do you have a good name, a Shem Tov, a good name, and Sarah, et cetera, et cetera. Another explanation, he brought him forth from a terrestrial sphere, elevating him above the stars, and that's why he uses the term habab, to look. He says, look at the heavens, for this word signifies looking from above downward. So already Rashi is actually saying astrology, stars, by the way, I'm not vouching for this. It's more of a historical thing that our commentators looked at the configuration of stars and horoscopes and all kinds of stuff. So what's the problem? And I'm just wait for somebody to respond to this. What is our issue if our world is predestined by the muzzle that we're standing under? What's our issue in this world? If I get up this morning and I read the horoscope in the New York Times, thank you. So what's the issue? If you are born under a certain constellation, and if you are born under a certain planetary situation, Margaret, you want to put that back up again? What's the issue? Why get up every day, right? Why get up every day? Because everything's predestined. You want to flash that back up again, Margaret? What she's going to type is, thank you, free will, right? Free will. So I'm going to share with you sort of a little segment of what we'll call, by the way, this week, the Parsha is named Balak, right? Balak is the story of, and some rabbis look at it as a comedic interlude or a miracle or whatever. But what happens is that the Jews are traveling through the desert, and they're traveling through the desert, and they ask permission to pass by Balak, and Balak says, no, can't pass. And Balak subcontracts Bilam to curse the Jewish people. He's a local priest, contract priest. And what he says is, and the idea at those times is, if Bilam can appeal to a God higher than our God, then that God our God must succumb to the Bilam God. Again, we have these stars and heavens and all these entities that are sort of in the picture. So let's. I'm going to ask you guys to read. I don't know how you do this. I forget how you do this on Zoom. And let's see if we can find. But I'm going to take you a little bit to. Let me just see if I can find the right one here. Just a sec. That's not the one we want. Just a second. Is this the one we want? No. Please be patient with me. Try this. Okay. So let's do a little bit of, now, according to the rabbis, and we're just going to go through this, that Rabbi Hanina, remember, this is assembled in Babylon. Now, I want to, about 1,500 years ago, we take on in the United States, for example, many of the influences of our surrounding people. Prior to, for example, 2,000 years ago, there was no mention, for example, in Judaism of the world to come. In the Torah, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there's no afterlife. It always says, and Jacob went to sleep with his ancestors. Only about 2,000 years ago do we start talking about the world to come. And I start to think that that Christianity starts to go into the picture. They're talking about a world to come. And slowly we intermingle with other people, and we start to change our philosophy based on our assimilation or influences with other, because remember, we're not a biblical religion, or a rabbinical religion. And rabbis rub shoulders with a lot of people. And we start to now look at things differently. This is a snapshot of what the rabbis were talking about in Babylon 1,500 years ago in the Babylonian Talmud, which you study every week. But this is a walkthrough a little bit on astrology. And I'm going to actually start it over here. That Rabbi Ashi, Rabbi Ashi lives in the 4th century. I and Dimi bar Kakutza were both born on the first day of the week. I became a king, the head of a yeshiva, and he became the head of a gang of thieves. Rather, one born on Sunday is either completely for the best or completely for the worst. What is the reason of this? It's because both light and darkness were created on the first day of creation. And now the rabbis start taking off on an interesting journey of you are who you are based on the day of the week that you were born. And I got to tell you, I went back when I read this and I said to Google, what day was I, oh, by the way, I turned 68 next Wednesday. So I said, what day of the week was June 30th, 1953? You were born on a Tuesday. So I went down and we'll have to see what kind of person I am that I was born on a Tuesday. But does anybody want, can anybody unmute? Can you read this okay? And let's go, whoever wants to unmute. We have lots of, by the way, we have 5 Phyllises who are involved in our congregation right now. So if I say Phyllis, who's gonna, one of the Phyllises unmute, and if you could read that. Okay. Okay, so Barry, you got your hand up? Let's go.
One who was born on the second day of the week, Monday, will be short-tempered person.
Oh, by the way, anybody born on Mondays? Better you don't know. So, okay. So
what is the reason for this? It is because on that day, the second day of creation, the upper and lower waters were divided. Therefore, it is a day of contentiousness. One who was born on the third day of the week will be a rich man and a promiscuous person.
I don't want to know, by the way, I don't want to know if you were born on the third day of the week, which was Tuesday. Let's not, uh-oh, that was me. Okay, go ahead. I'm neither rich, okay, whatever. Let's.
What is the reason for this? It is because on that day, the third day, vegetation was created. It grows abundantly, but is also mixed together without boundaries between the grass and the plants. One who was born on the fourth day of the week will be wise and enlightened person. What is the reason for this? It is because the heavenly lights were hung in the heavens on that day, and wisdom is likened to light.
Let me just lift this up. Okay, hang on, go ahead.
One who was born on the fifth day of the week will be a person who performs act of kindness. What is the reason for this? It is because on that day fish and fowl were created, and they do not receive their sustenance by performing work for people. They are sustained by the kindness of God alone. One who was born on the sixth day of the week will be a seeker. Rav Naaman bar Yitzhak said, this means that he will be one who seeks out mitzvot, as most of the activity on Friday involves preparation for Shabbat. One who was born on Shabbat will die on Shabbat, because they desecrated the great day of Shabbat on his behalf.
Whoa.
Rava bar Rav Shila said, and he will be called a person of great sanctity because he was born on the sacred day of Shabbat.
So let's stop there for a second. So I'm not telling you that I agree with everything that's just been said. My purpose is actually as a study a little bit about the influences of how Judaism evolves over time. And that at this particular point in time, that rabbis seem to be debating what is the effect of the stars and the constellations on our daily lives. And as Margot pointed out, how does this affect free will? And why get up in the morning if you actually have everything is destined for you? So the whole idea of Judaism is that we have free will. You know, you're loaded with certain, you know, it's like the boy comes home from school and he gets an F on math, and parents say, what happened? He says, well, I'm trying to figure out whether it's my genetics or the environment that I grew up in that caused me to have the F, right? In other words, it's not my fault, right? It's just, it's very easy in life to actually step back and say it's somebody else's fault, right? It wasn't me. It was a very popular song. It wasn't me. So here we go. Rabbi Hanina, I'm not sure if we're going to get into this. Rabbi Hanina says it's all destined. Rabbi Yochanan says the stars, the configuration, the day you were born influence, but you can break free of this, and you are not in shackles for the way, the day of the week or the month or whatever it is that you were born. Somebody want to take over? We're now going to go talk about planets, and we'll see how far we go. But there is a punchline here. I want you to stick around for. Anybody want to unmute and just take it? First in, Rita, go.
From the top, from Rabbi Hanina?
Rabbi Hanina, yeah.
Rabbi Hanina said to his students who heard all of this, go and tell the son of Leviah, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, it is not the constellation of the day of the week that determines a person's nature. Rather, it is the constellation of the hour that determines his nature.
Okay, now we're really into astrology. And has anybody ever had I've never done it, but had a complete chart done by an, I mean, it's fun to do just as a hoot, but you know, we're by the way, we're told in the Torah, don't go to a soothsayer, right? Don't go to a prognosticator. We as Jews say, all right, it's fun, you know, look, you have a shul, a bazaar or something, and someone is reading tea leaves. Okay, it's for fun, but you can't live by this. So this is also a little bit over the edge. So continue, please. One who was born under the influence of the sun will be a radiant person. He will eat from his own resources and drink from his own resources, and his secrets will be exposed. If he steals, he will not succeed, because he will be like the sun that shines and is revealed to all. Okay. One who was born under the influence of Venus will be a rich and promiscuous person. What is the reason for this? Because fire was born during the hour of Venus. He will be subject the fire of evil inclination, which burns perpetually. Okay, we're going through our tour of the galaxy here. One who was born under the influence of Mercury will be an enlightened and expert man, because Mercury is the sun's scribe, as it is closest to the sun. By the way, I'm amazed that 2,000 years ago, they had this amazing understanding of the solar system, right? Yeah. 2,000 years ago. So let me just move this up so we don't have to. Okay, let's go to the moon. One who was born under the influence of the moon will be a man who suffers pains, who builds and destroys and builds. He will be a man who eats not for his own resources and drinks not for his own resources, and whose secrets are hidden. If he steals, he will succeed, as he is like the moon that constantly changes form, whose light is not its own, and who is at times exposed and at times hidden. One who was born under the influence of Saturn will be a man whose thoughts are for naught. And some say that everything that others think about him and plan to do to him is for naught. One who was born under the influence of Jupiter, Tzedek, will be a just person, Stadkin. Yep. Rav Naaman Bar Zitzak said, and just in this context means just in the performance of mitzvot. So they're basically taking a look at different types of planets and where they're situated to the sun. And now Rabbi Ashai says, wait a second. He says, hang on. Oh, Rabbi Ashi, who's into this, says, if you're born under, we'll let you read this in a second. If you're born under the influence of Mars, you're going to be a blood spiller. And Rabbi says, I was, but I don't spill blood. So you want to continue? Yeah. He will be either a bloodletter or a thief, or slaughterer of animals, or a circumciser. Rabbah said, I was born under the influences of Mars, and I do not perform any of those activities. Abayi said, my master also punishes and kills as a judge. So in other words, he's born under the sign of a blood spiller. And I think if it goes here, okay. So in other words, you can be a doctor. At those times, they let blood, right? So this is, I'm just saying this actually, everyone, from a historical point of view, that look how the rabbis are debating these issues. So I want to, and they go on to say that different nations are affected by different constellations. And we go back into this section here where God goes to Abraham and says he brought him outside, look towards the heavens, and if you're able to count them, so your offspring shall be. So I want to show you, hang on. And Abraham said before him, I looked at my astrological map, and according to the configuration of my constellations, I'm not fit to have a son. The Holy One, blessed be, he said to him, emerge from your astrology. This is very shattering, actually, for those of us that follow Judaism, because we're now into, like, horoscopes don't have the biggest reputation for being credible. Somebody says to you, oh, I read my horoscope today in the New York, in the Daily News, and you say, yeah, right, you know, Gesundheit, you know, but here we have astrology sort of front and center. And the question now becomes, is there a constellation for Israel? What is your thinking? And I'm going to drop down to the bottom here. And this is just an amazing, one of my favorite stories in the entire Talmud. Who's going to take over? Here's what happens. We now have an issue, as Margot referred to, if our destiny is affected by the stars, the constellations, the day of the week that you were born, et cetera, and you're reading it ahead of me here, so it's a great story. What's the purpose of getting up every day? Can we push back against our destiny, so to speak? And by the way, this also has a lot to do with in the Torah, the original, the Torah says that the sins of the fathers will be visited upon the children, right? So if your parents or grandparents did something, that you are going to be affected by that. And so what's the purpose of getting up every day? Later on in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah says you are responsible for your own life, for your own sins, for your own rewards and blessings. And that's, so we change our philosophy. But what's the purpose of getting up every day if your heritage, if you're, so I just want to just see if I can find, yeah. So if somebody can read this, and this is one of the nicest stories, one of the ones I enjoy most in the Torah. So Dina, do you want to take it?
Sure. And from that which transpired to Rabbi Akiva as well, it can be derived that there is no constellation for the Jewish people. As Rabbi Akiva had a daughter, and Chaldean astrologers told him that on the same day that she enters the wedding canopy, a snake will bite her and she will die. She was very worried about this. On that day, her wedding day, she took the ornamental pin from her hair and stuck it into a hole in the wall for safekeeping. And it happened that it entered directly into the eye of the snake. In the morning, when she took the pin, the snake was pulled and came out with it.
So let's stop for a second. Let me build the story here. So the Chaldeans are the Babylonians. An astrologer comes over to Rabbi Akiva and says, on the day we've checked the stars, we just thought we'd let you know, that the mazal that seems to be showing up on the day of your daughter's wedding, we've consulted, and your daughter will die on the day of her wedding, okay? And what happens is that she is fixing her hair, and this, what do they call it here? An ornamental pin. In other translations, a brooch, right? And she takes the brooch, she's fixing her hair, she sticks it into the wall, the pin, or whatever it is, and later she finds out that there indeed was a snake in the wall, but she actually, when she stuck it into the wall, she actually stuck it into the eye of the snake and killed the snake. Okay, Ripley's believe it or not, okay? But that's what happens. Rabbi Akiva is now very confused by this. And do you want to continue, Dina?
Her father, Rabbi Akiva, said to her, "What did you do to merit being saved from the snake?" She told him, "In the evening, a poor person came and knocked on the door, and everyone was preoccupied with the feast and nobody heard him. I stood and took the portion that you had given me and gave it to him." Rabbi Akiva said to her, "You performed a mitzvah and you were saved in its merit." Rabbi Akiva went out and taught, based on this incident, that even though it is written, "and charity will save from death," it does not mean that it will save a person from only from an unusual death, but even from death itself.
What happened? Why was she spared? You want to take a shot at this, Dina? What did she do? What happens here?
She had given her portion of the meal to someone who needed it, and which was tzedakah and a mitzvah. And because of that, the circumstances that occurred happened.
That's it. So let's actually write the one act play here for a second, okay? She's sitting at her table. We've been to Orthodox weddings, right? And she's sitting there, in the Sheva Brachot, and everybody's dancing, da, 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 and everybody's dancing, and she's sitting there, and somebody knocks on the door. I have a Canadian accent. We call it a pauper, a pauper, or a homeless person knocks on the door and says, "Can you feed me? Can you?" And she's got this big 7-course meal in front of her, and the snake is poised in the wall to jump out and bite her and kill her. But she gets up and takes her portion out to the pauper out into the street, or maybe invites him in. And as she comes back in, this is like an interpretation, her hair is a little bit mussed, and she fixes her hair. And while she's fixing her hair, she puts the pin into the wall. And the snake, had she done nothing, and had she gone and just followed, ate her meal, looked out only for herself, she was a sitting duck for the snake. But because she comes in and she's standing in a different place, fixes her hair, puts her ornamental pin into the wall, the snake that was designed to kill her, she kills the snake. I'm not telling you, I'm not the New York Times, and I'm not CNN, and I'm not telling you that this happened exactly as it's sitting there, right? But what is the Talmud trying to teach us through this? And by the way, we can argue logically all you want, but what is it trying to actually say? And how does that connect to maybe even the message of Rosh Hashanah? Anybody want to take a shot?
Well, it's saying charity will save your life, save you from death.
Charity will save you. Let's go with a couple messages here. That's right, exactly. I mean, do we believe in that? I know a lot of charitable people that don't, that are not saved from death, right? Anybody else? What do you see of this? It's a very interesting section.
I think it's telling you to pay attention even to the smallest things. I mean, a brooch or a pin or whatever is not very large, but then again, neither is the snake's eye.
Right. It was one little thing that actually made the difference. Yeah. Anybody else has? By the way, we say that there are 70 faces of the Torah. Different people are going to see different things in this in this story. I want one more, and then I'll give you my take, which by the way is just my take. Yeah. Anybody want to take a shot?
Well, it's saying if you do good things, it makes you feel good. And maybe when you feel good, you are more careful or what have you, which contributes to your well-being.
Right. So, yes, and I'm going to tell you how I look at this. Let's go back to the astrology, right? There are certain influences on your life. And if you sit in the world as a bystander, then stuff is going to happen to you. I mean, the joke about the boy bringing home his report card. Your environment may affect you. Your genetics may affect you. The stars may affect you. But what the rabbis are trying to tell us here in the Talmud is that when you actually do a mitzvah, an act of generosity, of kindness, you actually change the trajectory of the world and of human circumstance. Now, there are many stories, you know, the boy that climbs the ladder to get the eggs, you know, from the bird and falls off the ladder. I mean, there are many times in this world where we try to do a good thing, and sometimes it backfires, sometimes a good Samaritan is hurt. But what the Talmud is also trying to say to us is, had she just minded her own business and been a bystander, that the snake would have gotten her. But because she was we use the phrase now, an upstander, and she was standing in a different place, and she actually changed the course of the fate that awaited her. So the bottom line here, and the reason I wanted to bring this forward, is that first of all, astrology is part of ancient Jewish thought, that if you go to the northern part of Israel when things improve, you will see on the floor of synagogues, however weird it may seem for us, that there are astrological charts on the ground, because people would look up at the stars, because that's where God lived, and look for signs from heaven of what are we doing on this earth. We get up every day and we wonder, what are we doing here? If we have faith, it's easier. But we're called Yisrael, and El means God, God, and Yisra means strugglers or wrestlers with God. We are constantly trying to find answers to how we got here, why we are who we are, why do some good people not have a good time of it, and other people who are evil. We're always looking for these answers. And this is a snapshot in time, 1,500 years ago, when the rabbis were looking at the stars and saying, is there a destiny on how we sit in the middle of God's universe? And if so, is it possible that we can change our fate by giving tzedakah, by looking after the poor person that comes to our door or who is hungry? And here's a perfect example of Rabbi Akiva's daughter, who by her act of kindness basically gets out of the line of fire of a snake, because she was kind and she did an act of tzedek. And that maybe we have the chance through mitzvahs and by living a good life, and by that we actually, when things are negative around us, that we actually have the chance to change the world's trajectory. And that is one of the reasons why next time, like this coming Rosh Hashanah, may we all be privileged to go there in person, to synagogue, or on Zoom, whatever when we say after the who will live and who will die, our philosophy says that repentance, right, tshuva, or returning, tefillah, prayer, and a tzedakah can change the decree. And what our theology is telling us is that when we put light into the world, when we put good into the world, that actually whatever negative destiny, and there's much evidence that it doesn't always work out this way, but a central ethical idea within Judaism is that a mitzvah changes and uplifts the world and makes it a better place. So that's where I wanted to bring this forward to you. Any comments about the astrology, or how do you feel about that being in the in the Talmud?
Well, I do have a question, a comment. If we don't go to astrologists, but somehow we did find out the information that you told us earlier about the day we were born and the months and the sign, will that help us to determine what exactly we need to do to better our life, to better ourselves? So is that information actually useful to us?
It's either a question or a rhetorical question, but I think that I was actually, my cousin is an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, and we were discussing this yesterday. And for example, we have a tradition in the Kabbalah that 1/60th of what you see in a dream is a message from Hashem of something, or of prophecy. For example, if you've ever dreamt about something that was going to be negative, that was going to happen to yourself or a loved one, when we say to somebody, I had a dream, please drive carefully today. you know, or something along that line. Anything that awakens us to beyond our sort of straight and narrow. If for example, the Taurus, the day of the week says we're hot-tempered, does it help? Do we get an idea of some of the things that we basically need to address in our lives? Anything that stimulates us to be better people is fine. I'm not sure, I can't vouch because I'm not an astrologer. I study the influences and the personalities of the different rabbis and see how those thoughts touch us today. Does it hurt, you know, as a lark or as a, I mean, I just got back from Florida. I was visiting snowbirds and it seems in certain parts of Miami, every fifth storefront is astrologers and tarot cards and all that other stuff. And the Torah is very specific about this. Don't try to cheat the future by getting a head start or getting a sign for what's going to happen in the future. Get up and live a good life. But if look, this information says that the stars seem to predestine that you are going to be this or that. Does it hurt to say, oh, maybe that's me, maybe I'll address that part? Because look, we all have shtick that we're trying to work on in this world. So I'm not really answering your question, but it's look, to get a different perspective of the things that everybody in this world, according to our, to the Kabbalah, every one of you has something incredibly special that only you can do. You have a spark of God inside you, and there's no two sparks that are the same. And you have a mission on this earth to do that. But every one of us has got a shtick that they're also working on, and only you know what that is. So anything that prompts you, whether it's astrology or whether it's dreams or whether to actually address some of that stuff that you are trying to work on to be a better person, it's not a bad thing. Whether it's factual, that's up to you to decide. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Then there's
Yes,
the question of why do bad things happen to good people?
I'm about to teach a Pirkei Avot class at 3:30, but I'm going to tell you what the rabbis actually say. First of all, we have a problem. The Jewish people never paid that much attention to what we call the world to come. You can't find that anywhere in the Torah or in the prophets or in the Proverbs. Nobody says, and you will be rewarded in the world to come. But we had a problem that we go through. By the way, when you read Chad Gadya, right? Everybody, at the end of the Seder, right? What that story is really about, and I'll get to the point in a second. What do we have? We have a little goat, right? What happens? What's the first animal? I think it's the cat that eats the goat, right? The cat is the sign of the Assyrian Empire. The dog eats the cat. The dog is the sign for the Babylonian Empire. The stick that hits the dog, that hits the cat, that hits the goat, the stick is Persia. So what that is a list of all of the different empires that have tried to kill the Jewish people over time. And there's a point here, I'll get to it. And who's left 3,000 years later? This little goat sitting there. Every one of those guys could have actually scratched, killed, bitten, or killed the goat, but we're still here. The reason I'm saying this to you is that theologically we have a problem. We have the Assyrians, we have the Babylonians, we have the Persians. I'm probably missing somebody. We have the Greeks, we have the Romans. And after a while, the rabbis are saying, why do bad things continue to happen to such a nice people? I mean, as far as people go, we're not in there trying to kill or enslave other people. There's no example. We must be reading the Torah wrong. Why do good things happen, so bad things happen to good people? The rabbis begin to think that our enemies, the Romans, the Greeks, you name them, let them have their day in the sun on this side of the earth for a short time, and they start to relook at the idea of the world to come and eternity and new, well, then the Jewish people must enjoy the Garden of Eden in the world to come. And you only start to see references of the world to come maybe about 2,000 years ago, not before, maybe 2,100, 2,200 years ago. You won't find it. So the answer to the question is rabbinical. I'm not, by the way, I'm not answering you because I know lots of bad people that have it good, and I know lots of people that have it bad, but the rabbinical, our wisdom literature seems to say that the bad people have a little bit of fun on this time, or a short time, but eternity is eternity. And those who are righteous will enjoy the fruits of their mitzvot for many years to come. It's not a satisfying answer, but that's our theology. Okay, any other questions? Or I hope that's interesting. It's just a little bit of an opening into the fact that we do have astrology not only in Jewish culture and the discussion on free will, but it's also on our postage stamps, it's on the floors of synagogues, etc. We don't follow it because it's not rational, and we tend to not follow it these days. But again, in the Babylonian Talmud, there is a substantial section. I skipped a lot of it. And if you want to know, if you want to go back to this, it's Shabbat 156b. You can access it by going Sefaria Shabbat 156b and ask your cell phone what day of the week that you were born on, and maybe you can go and just have a little fun and see what you're inclined towards. So I hope that's helpful to everybody. And any other questions or? Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
wonderful. Such a great perspective
that was
for
all
everybody.
very interesting.
Good.
Very, very interesting.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
As always, so good to see you.
All right. And everybody, a little early, have a Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good to see you.